The afternoon sun streamed through the massive glass windows of the Riverside shopping mall, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. It was a Saturday, and the place was packed with people carrying shopping bags, children tugging at their parents' hands, and teenagers laughing in groups near the food court. Among all these people, a young girl walked slowly through the main entrance. She looked about 12 years old, maybe 13. Her clothes were clean but clearly worn out. The jeans had faded patches on the knees and her jacket was a size too big, probably handed down from someone older. Her shoes made a soft squeaking sound on the shiny floor, and she clutched a faded backpack against her shoulder. Her name was Lily, though nobody in that mall knew it yet. And nobody really paid attention to her as she walked past the expensive stores with their bright lights and perfectly arranged displays. She didn't belong here, at least not in the way the other shoppers did. She wasn't here to buy anything. She couldn't afford to. Her mother worked as a cleaning lady in one of the big office buildings nearby. Every Saturday, Lily would finish her morning chores at home, and then make her way to the mall to wait. Her mother's shift ended at 5, and it was barely 3 o'clock. 2 hours to kill. 2 hours of wandering around, pretending to look at things she couldn't buy, trying to stay out of everyone's way. This had become their routine ever since they moved to the city 6 months ago. Back in their small town, things had been different. Not easier exactly, but simpler. Her father had passed away 3 years earlier, and her mother had worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat. But the town was dying, opportunities were disappearing, and finally her mother made the difficult decision to move to the city for better work. Better work meant longer hours and less money than they'd hoped. The city was expensive. Their tiny apartment was in a neighborhood where sirens wailed at night and the elevator rarely worked. But her mother never complained. She just worked harder, and Lily tried her best to make things easier by staying out of trouble and doing well in school. As Lily walked through the mall, she passed a jewelry store where a woman was trying on diamond earrings. She passed a toy store where kids were begging their parents for the latest video games. She passed a cafe where people sat with expensive coffee drinks, tapping on their laptops without a care in the world. This was a different universe from the one she lived in. Then she reached the central atrium, and she stopped walking. Right there, in the middle of the open space, sat the most beautiful piano she had ever seen. It was a grand piano, black and glossy with the lid propped open to show the intricate strings inside. The bench had a velvet cushion. The keys gleamed under the overhead lights like they'd never been touched by human hands. Lily felt her heart skip a beat. She'd seen pianos before, of course. There was one at her old community center back in her town. It was an ancient upright piano with chipped keys and a stuck pedal, donated by someone who probably wanted to throw it away. But Lily had spent countless hours at that piano, teaching herself to play from YouTube videos and old music books she'd found at garage sales. An elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, who volunteered at the center, had noticed Lily's interest and started giving her informal lessons once a week. Mrs. Patterson had been a piano teacher decades ago, and though her hands shook with age, she still remembered every note, every technique, every piece of advice her own teacher had given her. For 3 years, Lily practiced whenever she could. At home, she had a small electronic keyboard her mother had bought from a thrift store for $15. Half the keys didn't make sound, and it had to be propped up with books because one of the legs was broken. But Lily didn't care. She played anyway, her fingers moving across those faulty keys, hearing the right notes in her head even when they didn't come out of the speaker. Music had become her escape. When things got hard, when she missed her father, when she worried about her mother working herself to exhaustion, when kids at school whispered about her secondhand clothes, she could sit at that keyboard and disappear into another world, a world where none of that mattered. A world made entirely of sound and emotion and beauty. But she'd never seen a piano like this one. Not in real life. She took a few steps closer, almost in a trance. The mall noise seemed to fade away. She could see her reflection in the piano's glossy surface. There was a small velvet rope around it, the kind museums use to keep people from touching the exhibits. A sign nearby read, "Exclusive performances by acclaimed musicians. This instrument is generously provided by Steinway & Sons." Lily knew that name, Steinway. The best pianos in the world, the kind of piano concert performers used, the kind of piano she'd only ever seen in videos online, played by masters who'd trained at famous schools and performed in great concert halls. She stood there, just staring at it, her fingers twitching slightly at her sides. She wondered what it would feel like to play an instrument like that. Would the keys feel different? Would the sound be richer, fuller? Would her simple song somehow transform into something magical? People walked past her, barely noticing the girl standing there with wonder in her eyes. Why would they? She was nobody, just another kid in a mall. Nothing special about her at all, but inside Lily's chest her heart was beating fast. She looked around. No one seemed to be watching the piano. The security guards were busy checking bags near the entrance. The shoppers were focused on their own business, and that piano was just sitting there waiting. She knew she shouldn't. The sign made it clear this wasn't for public use, and she definitely didn't look like an acclaimed musician. She looked like exactly what she was, a poor kid with nowhere else to go on a Saturday afternoon. But something was pulling her toward it. Maybe it was the memory of all those hours of practice. Maybe it was the thought of Mrs. Patterson's encouraging smile when she finally got a difficult piece right. Maybe it was simply the desperate wish to touch something beautiful in a life that often felt hard and gray. Lily took another step forward. Then another. Her hand reached out, trembling slightly, moving toward those pristine white and black keys that seemed to glow with promise. She was so close now, just inches away. She could almost feel the cool smoothness of the ivory beneath her fingertips. And that's when she heard the laughter. The laughter came from behind her, sharp and mocking. Lily's hand froze in midair, just inches from the piano keys. Her whole body went stiff. "Oh my God, look at her," a voice said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Is she seriously about to touch that piano?" Lily slowly turned around. A group of 4 teenagers stood about 10 feet away, probably 16 or 17 years old. 3 girls and 1 boy, all dressed in expensive clothes with designer logos. They had that confident look that came from never worrying about money, never wondering if there would be enough food for dinner, never wearing the same worn-out jacket every single day. The girl who had spoken was holding a bubble tea in one hand and her phone in the other. She had perfect makeup and her nails were done in some complicated design that probably cost more than Lily's entire outfit. She was smirking, looking Lily up and down like she was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. "I don't think she even knows how much that piano costs," another girl said, giggling. She had long straight hair and carried at least 3 shopping bags from stores Lily had only ever walked past, never into. "Probably thinks it's like a toy or something," the boy added. He had his arm around one of the girls and was grinning like this was the most entertaining thing he'd seen all day. Lily felt her face getting hot. She wanted to say something, to defend herself, but the words got stuck in her throat. What could she say anyway? She did look out of place. She knew that. Everyone could see it. "Hey, those pianos are like super expensive," the first girl continued, raising her voice even more. She shouldn't even be standing that close to it. What if she breaks it or something? More people were starting to notice now. A couple walking past slowed down to see what was happening. A woman with a stroller stopped and looked over. The teenagers were making such a scene that it was impossible to ignore. Lily took a step back from the piano, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. She could feel tears starting to form in her eyes, but she blinked them back hard. She refused to cry in front of these people. She wouldn't give them that satisfaction. "I wasn't going to," she started to say, but her voice came out quiet and shaky. "You weren't going to what?" the girl with the bubble tea interrupted. "Touch it? Because it sure looked like you were about to. This isn't a public playground, you know. That's a Steinway. Do you even know what that means?" The cruel thing was that Lily did know what it meant. She probably knew more about Steinway pianos than any of these kids. She'd read about them, watched videos about how they were made, learned about the famous musicians who played them, but standing there in her faded clothes with everyone staring, that knowledge felt useless. "Maybe she's lost," one of the other girls suggested, fake concern in her voice. "Do you need help finding your mom? Is she working at one of the stores here?" The others laughed at that. They thought they were being so clever, so funny. Lily felt something twist inside her chest. Yes, her mother was working hard to give them a better life. There was nothing shameful about that, but these kids were using it like an insult. A security guard had noticed the commotion and started walking toward them. Great, Lily thought. Now she was going to get in trouble on top of being humiliated. The guard was a tall man with a stern expression, and he was looking right at her. By now, a small crowd had formed. About a dozen people had stopped to watch, and more were glancing over as they passed. Some looked curious, others looked uncomfortable. A few seemed to be enjoying the drama. The boy with the teenagers had pulled out his phone and was pointing it at Lily, recording. "This is going to be hilarious," he muttered to his friends, but loud enough for Lily to hear. "Wait till everyone at school sees this." A well-dressed woman in a business suit stepped forward from the crowd. She looked annoyed, like this whole situation was wasting her valuable time. "Excuse me, young lady," she said to Lily in a sharp tone. "That piano is not for the public to touch. It's very expensive and it's reserved for professional musicians only. You really shouldn't be near it." Lily opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. What could she say? That she played piano? That she'd been practicing for 3 years? That she probably spent more time thinking about music than anyone in this mall? They wouldn't believe her. Look at her. Who would believe her? "I think she gets it," the security guard said as he arrived. He didn't sound mean, just tired, like dealing with situations like this was something he had to do 10 times a day. "Come on, miss. Let's move away from the piano." He gestured for Lily to step back. The teenagers were snickering. The businesswoman nodded approvingly, like order had been restored to the universe. Other people in the crowd were shaking their heads or whispering to each other. Lily felt smaller than she'd ever felt in her life. She wanted to disappear. She wanted the floor to open up and swallow her whole. She wanted to be anywhere but here, with all these people looking at her like she was nothing, like she didn't matter, like she was just some poor kid who didn't know her place. The security guard was waiting for her to move. The teenagers were still recording. The crowd was getting bigger. And that beautiful piano sat there behind her, untouched, perfect, completely out of reach. But then something happened inside Lily. It started as a small feeling in her chest, like a tiny spark. Then it grew warmer, stronger. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something else. Something that had been building up through all the hard times. All the whispered comments at school. All the nights worrying about her mother. All the sacrifices and struggles and moments of feeling less than everyone else. She thought about her father, who had always told her she could do anything if she worked hard enough. She thought about her mother, who cleaned offices so Lily could have a better future. She thought about Mrs. Patterson, who had believed in her when no one else did. She thought about all those hours practicing on that broken keyboard, all those mornings waking up early to practice before school, all those times her fingers hurt but she kept playing anyway. Why should she be ashamed? She hadn't done anything wrong. She loved music. She'd worked harder at piano than most of these people had worked at anything in their entire lives. She had just as much right to appreciate that beautiful instrument as anyone else. The spark inside her chest grew into a flame. She looked at the security guard, then at the teenagers, then at the crowd, and finally at the piano. "I know how much it costs," Lily said quietly. Her voice was steadier now. "And I know what Steinway means. I know exactly what kind of piano that is." The girl with the bubble tea laughed. "Sure you do." Lily took a deep breath. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. This was probably a terrible idea. She was probably about to make everything worse. But she'd made her decision. She turned back to the piano, walked up to it, stepped over the velvet rope, and sat down on the bench. The crowd gasped. The teenagers stopped laughing. The security guard started to move forward. The businesswoman made a shocked sound. "Miss, you can't," the guard began. But Lily was done listening. She was done being invisible. She was done letting people tell her what she couldn't do. She placed her hands on the keys, feeling their perfect smoothness under her fingers. They were cool to the touch, responsive, alive with possibility. This was what a real piano felt like. This was what she'd dreamed about. "I'm sorry," she said, looking up at the security guard with determination in her eyes she didn't know she had. "But I need to play." And before anyone could stop her, she pressed down on the first key. The first note rang out clear and pure, echoing through the atrium like a bell. It was a single note, but it was perfect. The sound was richer and fuller than anything Lily had ever produced on her broken keyboard at home. It seemed to hang in the air, demanding attention. Then came the second note, and the third, and suddenly her fingers were moving across the keys like they had a mind of their own, playing a piece she'd practiced 1,000 times in her tiny apartment while her neighbors banged on the walls telling her to keep it. Down it was Clair de Lune by Debussy. Moonlight 1. of the most beautiful pieces ever written, and one that Mrs. Patterson had taught her note by note, measure by measure, until Lily could play it with her eyes closed. The melody floated through the mall, soft and gentle at first, like water rippling in a calm pond. The notes seemed to paint pictures in the air, images of night skies and quiet moments and dreams that felt just out of reach. Lily's hands moved with a grace that surprised even her. The Steinway responded to her touch like it had been waiting for her all along. The security guard had been reaching for her shoulder to pull her away, but his hand stopped in midair. He stood there frozen, listening. The teenagers who had been laughing just seconds ago went completely silent. The girl with the bubble tea lowered her phone slightly, her smirk fading. The boy who had been recording kept his camera pointed at Lily, but now his expression had changed from amusement to something else. Confusion, maybe, or surprise. The businesswoman who had scolded Lily stood with her mouth slightly open, her briefcase hanging forgotten from her hand. More people were gathering now. A man in a coffee shop uniform stepped out from behind his counter to hear better. A mother lifted her small child so he could see over the crowd. Shoppers on the second floor stopped at the railing, looking down at the girl playing piano in the center of it all. Lily wasn't thinking about any of them anymore. For the first time since walking into that mall, she wasn't thinking about her worn clothes or her squeaky shoes, or the way people looked at her. She wasn't thinking about the teenagers or the security guard or the crowd forming around her. She was just playing. Her fingers danced across the keys, moving from the gentle opening into the more complex middle section. This was the part that had taken her months to master, where the melody weaved in and out of itself like a conversation between two old friends. The left hand provided a steady foundation while the right hand sang out the story. It required precision, feeling, and perfect timing. She played it flawlessly. The sound filled every corner of the atrium. It drifted into stores where clerks stopped folding clothes to listen. It reached the food court where people paused with forks halfway to their mouths. It climbed up to the third floor where it mixed with the fountain sounds and somehow made everything more beautiful. Some people in the crowd had pulled out their phones now, but they weren't recording to mock her. They were capturing something rare, something special, something they knew they'd want to remember. A moment that didn't fit with the ordinary rhythm of a Saturday afternoon at the mall. Lily moved into the climax of the piece, where the emotion builds and builds until it feels like your heart might burst. Her whole body swayed slightly with the music, her face showing every feeling the notes expressed, joy and sadness, hope and longing all mixed together in a way that only music can capture. She remembered the first time she'd heard this piece. It was 2 years ago, late at night when she couldn't sleep because she was worried about her mother who had been sick with the flu, but still had to work. She'd found a recording on YouTube and listened to it on her phone. The volume turned down low. The music had made her cry, but in a good way. It had made her feel less alone. Now she was playing it herself, on a piano worth more than everything her family owned combined, and somehow that felt right. Like all the hard times and struggles had been leading to this exact moment. The piece began to wind down, the notes getting softer, more delicate. This was the hardest part. To play quietly while still maintaining the emotion, to let the sound fade without losing its power. Lily's touch became lighter, her fingers barely pressing the keys, coaxing out whispers of melody that seemed to float away like dandelion seeds on the wind. The final notes came, slow and peaceful, like the last stars fading as dawn breaks, and then silence, complete and total silence. Lily sat there, her hands still resting on the keys, breathing hard. She'd forgotten to breathe properly while playing, too lost in the music. Her heart was racing and she suddenly felt dizzy, like she'd just woken up from a dream and wasn't quite sure where she was. The silence stretched out for what felt like forever, but was probably only a few seconds. Lily slowly lifted her hands from the keys and turned to face the crowd, finally remembering where she was and what she'd just done. At least 50 people had gathered around the piano. Maybe more. They all stood perfectly still, staring at her. Oh no, Lily thought. What had she done? She'd probably broken some rule. Maybe damaged the piano. The security guard was going to kick her out for sure. Her mother would be so embarrassed. Maybe they'd even ban her from the mall, and then where would she wait on Saturdays? She started to stand up, ready to apologize, ready to run if she needed to, and then someone started clapping. It was a man standing near the back of the crowd, older, maybe 60, wearing an expensive-looking coat. He was clapping slowly at first, his hands coming together in a steady rhythm. The sound echoed in the silent space. Then someone else joined in, a woman with gray hair and kind eyes. Then another person, and another. Within seconds, the entire crowd was applauding. Not just polite golf claps either, but real applause. Enthusiastic, genuine, loud. Some people were smiling. Others had tears in their eyes. The mother holding her child was wiping her face with her free hand. The coffee shop worker was grinning and clapping so hard his hands must have hurt. Even the security guard was clapping, a surprised smile on his usually stern face. The teenagers stood in a cluster, not clapping but not laughing anymore either. The girl with the bubble tea had lowered her phone completely. She looked uncomfortable, like she'd just realized she'd made a terrible mistake. The boy had stopped recording. They were all just staring at Lily with expressions that were hard to read. Shock maybe, or shame. The businesswoman was clapping too, but she also looked embarrassed, her face slightly red. The applause grew louder. People were cheering now, whistling, calling out words of encouragement. A little girl in a pink dress broke free from her father's hand and ran up to Lily, offering her a half-eaten cookie as a gift. Lily took it, too stunned to do anything else, and the crowd laughed warmly. "That was incredible," someone shouted. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Another voice called out, "Do you take lessons? Who's your teacher?" The questions came from all directions. Lily felt overwhelmed, dizzy with disbelief. This wasn't what she'd expected. She'd expected anger, consequences, trouble, not this. Never this. The older man who had started the applause was making his way through the crowd toward her. He had a distinguished look about him, like someone important, someone who commanded respect. People stepped aside to let him through. He reached the piano and looked down at Lily with an expression of pure astonishment. "Young lady," he said, his voice carrying authority but also warmth. "That was one of the most beautiful performances I've heard in a very long time. And I've heard quite a few." Lily didn't know what to say. "Thank you," seemed too small for the moment. The man smiled, and suddenly his serious face looked kind, almost grandfatherly. "Tell me," he said, "what's your name and where on earth did you learn to play like that?" Lily's voice came out small and shaky. "My name is Lily, and I taught myself mostly. From videos online, and I had some help from a teacher back in my old town." The man's eyebrows shot up. "You taught yourself? From videos?" He looked at her like he was trying to solve a puzzle that didn't make sense. "That's remarkable. Truly remarkable." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to Lily. She took it with trembling fingers. The card was cream-colored and heavy, with elegant lettering that read, "Professor David Chen, Director, Metropolitan Conservatory of Music." Lily's eyes went wide. She knew that name. Well, not his name specifically, but she knew about the Metropolitan Conservatory. It was one of the most famous music schools in the country. People who graduated from there went on to perform in concert halls around the world. It was the kind of place she'd dreamed about but never imagined she could actually attend. "I've been teaching music for over 40 years, Professor Chen continued, "and I can recognize real talent when I hear it. What you just played, the technique was excellent, yes, but more importantly, you played with genuine emotion. You understood the music. That's something that can't be taught from a video." More people were gathering around now, listening to the conversation. Lily felt like she was in some kind of strange dream. Just 10 minutes ago, she'd been the target of mockery, and now this important man was talking to her about talent and emotion like she was someone who mattered. "How old are you, Lily?" the professor asked. 13. "I'll be 14 next month." He nodded thoughtfully. "And you said you learned from videos and one teacher? How long have you been playing?" "About 3 years. Maybe a little more. I started when I was 10. A woman in the crowd gasped. "Only 3 years? That's impossible." But Professor Chen was smiling. "Not impossible. Rare, but not impossible. Some people have a natural gift, and when combined with dedication and hard work, extraordinary things can happen." He looked at Lily intently. "I'm guessing you practice quite a lot." Lily nodded. "Every day, usually 2 or 3 hours, sometimes more on weekends." She didn't mention that she practiced on a broken keyboard or that half the time she was just imagining the notes because the keys didn't work. That seemed too embarrassing to share. "Would you play something else for us?" Professor Chen asked. "I'd very much like to hear more." Lily glanced at the security guard, worried he might say no. But the guard just smiled and gestured toward the piano. "I think we can make an exception," he said warmly. His whole attitude had changed completely. The crowd murmured with excitement. People moved closer, some sitting down on the floor to get comfortable. Parents lifted children onto their shoulders. The coffee shop worker had apparently put up a "back in 10 minutes" sign because he was now sitting cross-legged on the marble floor with a huge grin on his face. Lily turned back to the piano, her heart still racing, but for a different reason now. She thought about what to play, something that would show what she could do, but also something that meant something to her. She decided on a piece by Chopin, one of the nocturnes. It was technically challenging, but also deeply beautiful. Mrs. Patterson had introduced her to Chopin's music, telling her that he was called the poet of the piano because his compositions were like poetry made into sound. Lily placed her fingers on the keys again, took a deep breath, and began to play. This piece was different from the first one. It had more complexity, faster runs of notes, dramatic moments that required both hands to work in perfect coordination, but it also had passages of incredible tenderness, moments where a single melodic line could break your heart. As she played, Lily forgot about everything else again. She forgot about the crowd, the professor, even her embarrassment from earlier. She just let the music flow through her fingers. She thought about her father, who used to whistle while he cooked dinner. She thought about her mother, working hard at this very moment so Lily could have a better life. She thought about Mrs. Patterson's patient voice saying, "Feel the music. Don't just play the notes." The piece had a section in the middle where the tempo picked up, where the notes cascaded like a waterfall. Lily's fingers flew across the keys, hitting each note precisely. Some people in the crowd leaned forward, watching her hands move with fascination. It looked almost impossible, the way her fingers seemed to dance independently of each other. Then the music slowed again, becoming soft and introspective. This was the part that always made Lily want to cry. There was something about the way Chopin wrote these melodies. They captured a feeling of longing, of beautiful sadness, of hope mixed with heartache. When she finished, the applause was even louder than before. People were on their feet now, giving her a standing ovation. Some were actually crying. Professor Chen was clapping with his hands raised high, a look of absolute delight on his face. "Extraordinary," he exclaimed. Simply extraordinary. The crowd was buzzing with excitement. People were pulling out their phones, not to mock, but to share what they'd just witnessed. Lily could hear fragments of conversations. "Did you record that?" "We have to post this." "Wait till I tell everyone at work about this." The teenager who had been so cruel earlier, the one with the bubble tea, slowly approached. She looked uncomfortable, her confidence from before completely gone. Her friend stayed back, but she walked right up to Lily. "Hey," she said quietly so only Lily could hear. I'm really sorry about what I said before. That was messed up. You're incredibly talented. I was being a jerk." Lily didn't know what to say. Part of her was still hurt by the earlier mockery, but another part of her understood. She'd been judged by her appearance her whole life. Maybe this girl had learned something today. "It's okay," Lily said finally. "Thanks for apologizing." The girl nodded, relief washing over her face, and walked back to her friends. They all left quickly after that, probably eager to escape the scene of their embarrassment. Professor Chen was talking to several people in the crowd, but he kept glancing back at Lily like he was afraid she might disappear. Finally, he returned to her side. "Lily, I don't want to overwhelm you, but I'd like to discuss something important with you and your parents. The conservatory has a youth program for exceptionally talented students. It's quite competitive. We only accept a handful of students each year. But I think you would be a perfect fit." Lily's heart skipped. "A youth program? But I can't afford—" Professor Chen held up his hand gently. "The program includes full scholarships for students with financial need. That covers everything: lessons, practice time, even some support for families if necessary. Our goal is to find and nurture talent regardless of a student's background." Lily felt tears forming in her eyes. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. "There's more," the professor continued. "If you're interested, I'd like to become your mentor personally. I don't take on many private students anymore, but when I see someone with your gift, I can't let it go to waste." A woman who had been watching from the crowd stepped forward. She was well-dressed and had kind eyes. "Excuse me," she said. "I couldn't help but overhear. I'm a reporter for the city newspaper. Would you be willing to let me write a story about this? I think people need to hear about what happened here today." Before Lily could answer, the security guard spoke up. "And the mall would like to invite you to perform here regularly if you're interested. We have community events every month. We'd be honored to have you play." Everything was happening so fast. Lily felt dizzy with it all. Just an hour ago, she'd been just another invisible kid waiting for her mother to finish work. Now there was a professor offering her a scholarship, a reporter wanting to write about her, people asking for her contact information, strangers telling her she'd inspired them. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a text from her mother. "Almost done with work. Meet me at the west entrance in 15 minutes? Lily looked at the time and realized with shock that it was already past 5 o'clock. The 2 hours she'd been dreading had flown by in what felt like minutes. "I have to go," she said to Professor Chen. "My mom's waiting for me." "Of course," he said. "But please keep my card. Call me tomorrow if you can. We'll set up a time to meet with you and your mother to discuss everything properly." Lily nodded, clutching the business card like it was made of gold. As she gathered her backpack and started to leave, people called out to her. "Thank you. You're amazing. Please come back." The coffee shop worker pressed a gift card into her hand. "For you," he said. "You made my whole week." Lily walked through the mall toward the west entrance in a daze. She kept expecting to wake up, to realize this had all been some elaborate daydream. But the business card in her hand was real. The gift card was real. The memory of playing that beautiful Steinway piano was real. She reached the entrance just as her mother came through the doors, looking tired as always, her cleaning uniform visible under her jacket. "Hi, sweetheart," her mother said with a weary smile. "How was your afternoon? Boring as usual?" Lily looked at her mother, at this woman who worked so hard and sacrificed so much, and felt her eyes fill with tears for the third time that day. "Mom," she said, her voice cracking with emotion, "you're not going to believe what just happened." Lily's mother stood in their small apartment that evening, reading Professor Chen's business card for the 5th time. She kept turning it over in her hands like she was checking to make sure it was real. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the old refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. "A full scholarship," her mother whispered, sitting down slowly on their worn couch, "to the Metropolitan Conservatory." She looked up at Lily with tears streaming down her face. "Baby, do you know what this means?" Lily sat beside her mother and took her hand. "It means all those years you worked extra shifts weren't for nothing. It means Dad would be proud. It means everything's going to be okay." Her mother pulled her into a tight hug and they both cried together. Happy tears this time. Tears of relief and hope and gratitude for a future that suddenly looked so much brighter than it had that morning. The next day, Lily and her mother met with Professor Chen at the conservatory. The building was beautiful, with high ceilings and large windows that let in streams of sunlight. Lily could hear piano music coming from different practice rooms, creating a symphony of sounds that made her heart race with excitement. Professor Chen showed them around personally, introducing them to other teachers and students. Everyone was welcoming and kind. Nobody looked at Lily's clothes or her old backpack. They only cared about one thing, her music. "We'll start you with lessons 3 times a week," the professor explained as they sat in his office. "You'll have access to our practice rooms whenever you need them. And Lily, I want you to know something important." He leaned forward, his expression serious but warm. "You have a rare gift, but talent alone isn't enough. You'll need to work harder than you've ever worked before. The other students here have been training since they were very young with private teachers. You'll need to catch up on some technical foundations. Will you be ready for that?" Lily didn't hesitate. "Yes, I'm ready." Her mother squeezed her hand, pride shining in her eyes. Within a week, the newspaper article came out. The headline read, "Mall Piano Performance Goes Viral, Teenage Prodigy Discovered." The reporter had interviewed Lily, her mother, Professor Chen, and even some of the people who had been in the crowd that day. The article talked about how Lily had taught herself to play, how she'd practiced on a broken keyboard, how she'd faced mockery but played anyway. But what really made the story spread wasn't just the newspaper. It was the videos. Multiple people had recorded Lily's performance that day, and they'd posted them online. By the end of the week, the videos had been viewed millions of times. People from all over the country, all over the world even, were watching this young girl in worn-out clothes play piano like her life depended on it. The comment section was filled with messages of support and inspiration. "This made me cry. Never judge someone by how they look. She plays with so much emotion. This girl is going places," teachers were sharing the video with their students as an example of dedication and perseverance. Musicians were analyzing her technique and marveling at what she'd accomplished with so little formal training. But one comment stood out to Lily more than all the others. It was from someone who said, "I was having the worst day of my life when I watched this video. I was ready to give up on my dreams. But seeing this girl face all that judgment and still have the courage to play, it reminded me why I can't quit." Thank you, whoever you are. Lily read that comment over and over. The idea that her music, her moment of courage, had helped someone else keep going. That meant more to her than all the views and likes combined. The mall kept their promise too. They invited Lily to perform at their monthly community events. Every first Saturday she would play for an hour, and crowds would gather to listen. The same security guard who had almost escorted her away that first day now made sure she had everything she needed. The coffee shop worker always brought her a hot chocolate before she played. Even the teenagers who had mocked her showed up one day. They approached Lily before her performance, all of them looking uncomfortable but determined. "We wanted to apologize in person," the girl who had led the mockery said. "What we did was really horrible. We've been thinking about it ever since, and we wanted you to know that watching you that day, it changed something in us. You taught us that we need to be better people." Lily accepted their apology with grace. She understood that everyone makes mistakes. What mattered was learning from them. As months passed, Lily's life transformed in ways she'd never imagined. She worked incredibly hard at the conservatory, just as Professor Chen had warned she'd need to. There were days when her fingers hurt from practicing, days when the technical exercises felt boring and endless, days when she felt frustrated that other students could play things she still struggled with, but she never gave up. Every time she wanted to quit, she remembered that day at the mall. She remembered the feeling of sitting at that Steinway, of making the choice to be brave, of proving to everyone, but mostly to herself, that she had something valuable to offer the world. Professor Chen worked with her patiently, helping her develop proper technique while nurturing the emotional depth that made her playing special. "Never lose that feeling," he told her often. "Technique is important, but what you have, that connection to the music, that's what makes you extraordinary." Her mother's life changed too. A charitable foundation that had read about Lily's story reached out to help. They provided financial support so her mother could work fewer hours and spend more time supporting Lily's education. For the first time in years, her mother looked rested. She came to every performance, sitting in the front row with tears of pride streaming down her face. A year after that fateful day at the mall, Lily gave her first formal recital at the conservatory's concert hall. The seats were filled with people who had heard about her story, teachers, students, reporters, and many of the people who had been at the mall that day. The coffee shop worker was there. The security guard brought his whole family. Even some of the teenagers came watching with genuine admiration.